Good morning or afternoon or evening or whenever you're watching this. If you're watching it, wherever you are, whatever time. Hello, everybody. Happy holidays. Happy weekend. Thank you for being whenever you are. If you see this, you have questions, please ask me. Please like, subscribe, and share. I don't ask all the time, but please do so. Comment, like, subscribe, share, dance, whatever. I started this earlier and I had to stop it because there was a technical problem. So I'm throwing this out here. I think it's an interesting issue. So the issue is the thing I'm talking about in this particular one. I think it's interesting. I hate when people say something's interesting because it's all a personal opinion. So this interests me. Whether it interests anybody else, I have no clue. But the topic would be, can the president fire Jerome Powell? And the practicalities about that. So since it's in the news, I figured I'd touch upon it. It's all speculation, obviously it's not legal advice, et cetera, et cetera. And it's just my opinion and hopefully some entertainment. Before I start, this wasn't one of the jokes I was going to say, but it's so funny I had to say it anyway. Of course, that's very subjective, and that's from a guy who likes these jokes. So, what is an opossum's favorite movie? Mission Impossible. Hope I said that correctly. What do you call a porcupine interviewing for a job at a balloon factory? Unemployed. What do you get when you cross a fish and an elephant? Got to think about this one. Swimming trunks. And last but not least, and this is probably the most applicable to most of you, I think. What do you call a miniature porcupine who steals money from people? A hedge fund hog. That really is applicable to most of us. Anyway, I wanted to talk about briefly, as I say, and briefly is for a lawyer at my graduation from law school. I remember, that's a long time ago, but I remember the guy who gave the valedictorian speech. He said, only lawyers would call a 50,000 word document a brief. Anyway, so the topic here is, can the president fire the head of the Fed or any regulatory agency? And there is a couple of cases that are currently proceeding. So in April, I think the White House administration asked the court to review cases involving people at the NLRB, which is the National Labor Relations Board, and regulators there. And I think it would apply to other regulators, but there was a series of actions, series of court actions. These people were fired from their positions, then rehired, and whatever. It went up through the DC District Court of Appeals. As it turns out, that's the same Court of Appeals that has been handling the Alpine matters, and it's been going back and forth. Now it's before the Supreme Court, and the question is, can the president fire somebody who's head of a regulatory agency, something along those lines? And the question is, they don't know if the court's going to decide this before the end of this term. The end of the term, the Supreme Court, is June. So usually they take cases earlier, then a bunch of briefs are submitted and they review them, and then they make decisions, and then they have to write the opinion, and then that's issued. And that usually happens all before the end of June. The term starts October, goes to the end of June. So we're already in April 19th. So we're near the end of that term. So whether the Supreme Court will actually rule on those cases about whether the executive branch can terminate somebody, a regulator, we don't know if it's going to be this term or it's going to be next term. The next term would start October, would run through June, and they might start a case now, but actually have the oral arguments and the briefing next year, and etc. We really don't know. but that's pending, and I think the White House is very interested to see the outcome because it might change the rules with regard to terminating regulators. Now, as it comes to Jerome Powell, there's a mix of opinion that I've heard outside, and this is just opinion, and there's a lot of opinion that if the Fed chief got fired, that would be a dramatic event, would dramatically impact the stock market in a negative way because that would suggest that there would be no independence of the economic from the executive. And let's say an executive was in his first term and he wanted to run for office. There are probably things they could do to manipulate the Fed, the economics near the end of their term to give a false sense of what's going on. So I think it's a good idea to keep some independence. Now, of course, if the Fed or any regulator is not doing their job, they can be dismissed. But there's a process for it. And the standard, I'm looking at the standard because I saw it. So in those cases, they say right now, as of now, regulator can be dismissed for any case of inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance in office. And what those are, that's kind of a case by case basis. It's very subjective. Obviously, somebody steals, somebody doesn't show up to work for 6 months. There's easy cases, but probably most of those are not easy. And I don't think there's any accusation, for example, that Powell didn't do his job. He may disagree about how he did his job, but I don't think there's anything that's black and white about it. So if you move forward, and I happen to find something from 2024, and it was talking about getting rid of Gensler for cause, ironically, as a regulator, and they described the process. So the way the process would work is, one, you'd have to give an announcement. The president announces his intention to remove the regulator. Two, and that would be one day. Two, then there'd be some investigation that would occur through, I guess, the executive branch, although I would be wondering why Congress wouldn't be doing this, but an investigation would be conducted to see if there was evidence of inefficiency, neglect of duty, or malfeasance, and that could last anywhere from 1 to 3 months. And then there would be a period of time that if in fact there was cause theoretically found, notice would be provided to the regulator and they would have a period of time to respond to that, let's say another month. And then after the response time, either there'll be a further response from the White House or a decision would be reached internally. They would review the evidence, they would review the responses, and they would have to do this just to give an appearance of fairness. And that might take 1 to 2 months. And then eventually a decision would be issued. If a decision would be issued, depending on how it went either way, it's likely to be challenged in court on appeal. That process is likely to last anywhere from 6 to 18 months. Could be more, but let's say we'll use 12 months as the measure that we're going to use. And then if in fact the court approves the expulsion or termination of the regulator, then there's a period of time where the actual appointment has to occur and the transition is managed. So we're now in the middle of April. None of this has started. And Powell's going to be out of here next year, no matter what. So using those time components and putting them together, I think from a practical side, it's unlikely that Powell can be forced out of his position before his position terminates on time anyway. Now, the other thing that I've heard is kind of an interesting, I think, interesting take on what will happen to Powell is he has concern for the independence of the Fed, and there are some people who believe, as opposed to waiting to be kicked out or have some process started, that there'll be some procedure that's going to happen, and his successor is going to be announced from the White House. And I forgot the guy, maybe it's Kenneth Walsh. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but there's a guy that already is going to be nominated to be Powell's replacement. I think the White House has acknowledged it. And there's been thought that what they might do is they might pre-announce the successor of Powell, and then Powell will step down prior to his termination, and then he won't have been removed, and then the independence of the Federal Reserve will have been protected. That's another thought process. But either way, unless he steps down, I don't think there's enough time for the president to formally remove him. Now, could he use uh, some claim of national emergency or something like that to justify it? Perhaps. I don't know if the Supreme Court would uphold that. But if he follows the normal process, if there is a normal process, it doesn't seem like there's enough time. And there may be, again, a practical way of him leaving without being challenged and with the potential replacement being nominated and announced. I think that's the way that might happen. But anyway, it's been talked about in the newspapers. It probably will be talked about. And now you kind of know the sequence of events and how it might go and the likelihood of it occurring before he's out. And it'll kind of also give you an idea of this kind of the seriousness of the discussion that's going on, because in large part, to me, it sounds like a big bluff, because I just don't think in practicality he can be removed in a timely fashion, even if it could be shown that he had breached his duty or committed malfeasance, etc., which in the government, I doubt if he's met those standards, but I don't know. But anyway, just wanted to give you a brief update. If you have any questions about that, any comments, any thoughts, please put them in the comment section whenever you get to them. In the meantime, I want you to have a really good day. Be well, take care, and see you soon.